So, what if I told you that the quickest path to your first 100 grand isn't some crazy exciting stock pick, and it's definitely not some crypto get rich quick thing? What if the secret was actually, well, being kind of boring? Yeah, let's get into it because today we're going to break down something called the boring stack. It's a 5-layer system, just a simple set of habits, really, that if you stick with them, can make you wealthier than pretty much anyone you know. And this whole idea really kicks off with this powerful quote from Morgan Housel, the guy who wrote The Psychology of Money. And look, this is not what the Wall Street bros or the crypto day traders want you to believe, but it's the absolute truth we're going to unpack here. It's not about how much money you make, it's all about how much you actually keep. So, what exactly is this thing? Well, we're calling it the boring stack. It's basically a framework with 5 layers. Think of it like building blocks. Each one sits on top of the last, and together they create this super reliable, almost predictable path to actually hitting your big money goals. All right, so here's the game plan for this explainer. We'll touch on the boring path to wealth, and then we're diving straight into those 5 layers. First, knowing your number. Second, becoming irreplaceable. Third, mastering your spending. Fourth, automating everything. And finally, the big one, trusting the process. Let's jump in. Okay, let's start with layer 1. You've got to know your number. This is, without a doubt, the foundation of everything. You know the saying, vague goals get vague results? Well, it's absolutely true. So the very first thing you have to do is get super, super clear on what you're actually shooting for. And listen, this isn't just some feel-good advice. We've got the data to prove it. Studies have found that people who literally just write down specific, measurable goals are a whopping 42% more likely to hit them. 42%. So the takeaway here is simple. You have to put a real number and a timeline on what you want. So what does that actually look like for our goal of 100 grand? Well, this table makes it super simple. Want to get there in 3 years? That's about $91 a day. Can you wait 5 years? It drops to $55 a day. And if you give yourself 7 years, it's just $39 a day. Suddenly, that huge, scary number feels, well, a lot more doable, right? And this brings us to probably the most important insight for getting to that first 100K. I need you to forget everything you've heard about fancy investing tactics. Seriously. In the beginning, this is a savings game, not an investing game, period. Let's just look at the math, because it doesn't lie. Okay, say you save and invest $15,000 a year and you get a pretty average 4.5% return. After about 6 years, boom, you're over 100 grand. But here's the kicker. Look at where that money came from. A massive 85% of it was just your raw savings. Only 15% came from your investments actually growing. All right, but you're thinking, hey, I'm a pretty good investor. Okay, let's say you crush it and average a 10% return. Sure, you'll get there a year faster, but your savings still account for 77% of the total pile. The math is just so clear on this. Okay, let's get ridiculous. Let's say you're a total genius. You're getting Warren Buffett level returns of 20% a year. I mean, legendary stuff. Even then, after 5 years, a full 60% of your first 100K is still the money you put in. It just proves that boring truth over and over. Your savings rate is the engine that does all the heavy lifting at the start. All right, let's move on to layer 2, become irreplaceable. You see, if your savings rate is the engine, then your income is the fuel that makes it go. And the only way to get more fuel is to develop skills that make you really hard to replace. And this is really about understanding the difference between skills that are easy to replace and skills that aren't. I mean, on one hand, you've got stuff AI can do now or just generic writing. But on the other hand, you've got skills that demand top dollar. Think of a great plumber, a top brain surgeon, or even just someone who is an incredible communicator. The more rare and in demand your skills are, the more you're going to get paid. So this is the question you really need to ask yourself. And be honest. In a world where AI is getting scarily good every single day, could a robot do your job? If the answer is yes, or even a maybe soon, then it's a huge wake-up call. It's time to focus on building skills that are defensible, skills where that human touch, that creativity, is what makes you valuable. Okay, moving on to layer 3, mastering or spending. We've talked about making more money. Now let's talk about the other half of the equation. And let me be clear, this isn't about being cheap. It's about being intentional with the choices you make every single day. And we're going to break this down with a couple of super practical tips you can literally start using today. First, the 24-hour rule, and second, using easy alternate swaps. First up, the 24-hour rule.
This thing is a total game changer for fighting off those impulse buys. The rule is dead simple. For any purchase that isn't essential, over a set amount, let's say $100, you just have to wait 24 hours. That's it. It creates this little cooling off period where you can ask yourself, do I really need this? And you'll be shocked how often that must-have feeling just evaporates.
Next, let's talk about easy alternate swaps. All this means is, before you spend money, just pause and ask, is there a cheaper way to do this? Like making your coffee at home instead of that $7 latte. Or meal prepping for the week instead of buying lunch out every day. Even just skipping the expensive drink when you go out to eat. These little things, they seem small, but they add up to a ton of money over time. And again, I really want to drive this point home. This is all about your mindset. There is a massive difference between being cheap, which feels like you're depriving yourself, and being deliberate, which is about empowerment. You're just making conscious choices to line up your spending with your actual goal, that $100,000. Which brings us perfectly to layer 4, automate everything. This is where the magic happens. This is how we take willpower completely out of the picture and basically make success the default setting. The goal is to build a system where the right thing happens automatically, without you even having to think about it. James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, he nails this idea. He says you shouldn't rely on motivation, because we all know that comes and goes. Instead, you design your environment for success. And when it comes to money, that means one thing: setting up automatic transfers. You pay yourself first on autopilot. And yep, the research on this is crystal clear. People who set up automatic savings, where a chunk of their paycheck just zips over to savings or investments automatically, they crush their goals way more often than people who try to do it manually. And the reason is simple, right? The money is out of sight, out of mind. It's gone before you can even think about spending it. And that brings us to the final layer of the stack. And honestly, this is probably the hardest one. Not because it takes any skill, but because it takes the one thing we're all terrible with: patience. It just requires time. You have to learn to trust the process. And this right here explains why it's so dang hard. See, in most of life, we get instant feedback. Think about hitting a golf ball. You swing, you shank it, you immediately know you messed up. But building wealth, that's got a seriously delayed feedback loop. You can be doing everything right for months, a year even, and it feels like you're going nowhere. And that's the exact moment most people quit. So because of that delay, you have to set your expectations right. We're talking about hitting that $100,000 in probably 4 to 7 years. And I want to leave you with this one last thought. 7 years from now is going to arrive no matter what. It's coming. The only question is, where will you be when it gets here? Will you be sitting on $100,000, or will you be right where you started, wondering where the time went? The boring path absolutely works, but only if you have the patience to walk it.